Rana, PhD scholar from Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi. On behalf of the department, I welcome all of you. We are here at the second day of our international webinar, and this is our fourth session. It's the international webinar on Assamese literature in translation theory and practice. We are very pleased to welcome all our listeners today. And we have 4 presentations lined up for today. And I really welcome our 4 esteemed speakers. Professor Satyakam Thakur, Dr. Ratnotma Das ma'am, Dr. Judy Datta ma'am, and Aruni Kashyap sir. So according to the format, each speaker will be given 20 minutes, and this will be followed by 10 minutes of discussion session, in which I'll take questions. And some instruction for our dear listeners. I would really request them to keep themselves muted so that we can enjoy all the wonderful presentations that are lined up for today. And also, if you have any kind of queries or comments or questions, keep writing them in the chat box so that we can address them timely. And without further delay, I warmly welcome our first speaker of the day, Professor Satyakam Thakur sir. He is a professor at the Department of Assamese, Dibrugarh University, a poet and critique, writes both in Assamese and English. He has 8 books to his credit, and he has published research papers in national and international journal. He's a regular columnist of Assamese media, and he also have been serving as a member of language advisory for Assamese at the Sahitya Academy, and also academic member of several institutions, including Athens Institute for Education and Research. So today he is presenting on the topic of translation of the cultural constant, a quest on select translation of Assamese texts. So, sir, I'm honored to welcome you. The stage is all yours. I hand over the mic to you now, sir.
Thank you, Ruchi. This is indeed a matter of great pleasure for me to speak a few words before the honored participants of this afternoon. And good afternoon to you all. After pandemic, I believe that it is we are getting another opportunity to share our views and faith through online media, virtual mode. At least we are, though the pandemic is going on, but we are getting the opportunity to meet you all through online mode. And this virtual meeting may not serve all the aspects of face-to-face meeting of a seminar or conference, but we are meeting. This has also one positive side, that we are meeting frequently in various forums. So today I am trying to speak a few words about the translation of cultural content, quest on select translations of Assamese text. The examples of select Assamese text here, and you know that cultural constant culture, it is a composition of cultural universals and cultural constant. And people say that many people discuss about 7 points of cultural universals. Every person, every human being is a universal citizen, and therefore he has or she has some universal characteristics and universal cultural characteristics, which builds upon the foundation of these 7 points. Or some people say that it is 5 points or it is 9 points also, but I believe on these 7 points. That's why I'm citing these 7 points. And these are the environment, economics, institutions, beliefs, languages, art, recreation.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Could you speak a bit louder?
Are you getting my voice?
Sir, a little louder. Yeah.
Little louder. Okay.
We can hear you, but if you could please speak a little louder.
might be problem with the microphone. It's loud here. So I'll try again. This is what is happening. Okay, now fine.
Sir, can you speak directly, sir, without mic, sir?
No, I am on desktop. I am on desktop now. So could you give me some time to change my microphone? I can change my microphone or headphone.
All right, sir, no issues.
Just a minute. Am I audible? Is it fine?
Yes, sir. Can you speak? Sir, could you say something so that we can just... Yes, sir, we can hear you. Sir, am I audible to you? Hello? Hello, sir. Sir, we can't hear you. Hello? Okay. Sorry, sir, we can't hear you. I think it's better if you use your laptop only and you can... Hello? Sorry, sir, you're not audible.
Ruchi, actually, he's using desktop.
Yes, sir. No, actually, sir, he connected to his headphones, so we can't hear him now. So should I ask him to... I think he can't hear us, so I'll just type the message in the chat box.
Should I call and tell? Sir?
Yes. Call and tell.
Okay. What should I tell exactly?
Madam, he can directly join even through mobile also, madam. That is also better. Joining through mobile, that is better, madam.
Problem is he cannot share the PPT.
In mobile also he can share, sir, but otherwise also.
He has switched off his mobile. I think not to be disturbed. I think we should write on the chat box. That is the only option.
He can share screen, but for he is calling you, madam.
Yeah.
He's calling up.
Hello?
Otherwise,
Hello?
sorry.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. Okay, sure. Sir,
For share
he
his,
is, sir, he
madam,
is
for share
telling,
his, 1 second, madam. For sharing screen, he can use his desktop. For speech, he can use his mobile phone, madam.
no, it's okay. He says that he is changing his microphone. Just give me a moment. He says like this.
You can take the permission, then we can move to you. We can do it after you.
Can we move on to, ma'am, you are the next
That
presenter.
what I am
If
suggesting.
that's possible. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That what I am suggesting. But before that, she should inform him.
Yeah, because he
Yes,
told
yes.
Okonman Roba. He just told, just give me a moment. Should we wait 1 minute? I think we should wait a minute.
We have no choice. We have to obey the convener.
Nothing like that, sir. Hello? Sorry? Okay, just a minute. Venkat sir, can you hear me? Venkat sir?
Ha, madam.
He says the host is not allowing the audio.
No, madam. There is no problem from our side. He is already, I think, 1 second, madam. He is a co-host, madam.
Okay. So I'll ask him.
He let him join through mobile. He can use mobile for the video and he can share screen from desktop. It is easy. It is just made.
Okay.
Let us give
Okay.
You throw the other proposal.
Okay.
You can tell him to get ready in another 20 minutes and we will come back.
No, he said he's coming. These are some unwanted, inevitable problems with virtual.
Am I audible now? Am I
Sir.
audible now?
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You may please continue.
I'm extremely sorry for the technical problem for which we had to spend a few minutes. I think 10 minutes. It was okay. Fine. This is the cultural universals, which are the meta narrative, which creates the meta narratives of the culture of being. This is the environment, the economics, the institutions, the beliefs, the languages, the earth, the recreations. But though this is it works to create the universal characteristics of human being, but the culture always creates an identity of a group by some cultural constants, which is nothing but a system of meaning. And you know that if you go to the previous slide, then we'll see that the environment, but environment, what it makes the context of one culture, one particular culture. This is called environment. But the context is different in among the different cultural parallels. That's why the environment, what we tell as a cultural universal, it has some cultural constants inside it, which is closely related to the process of meaning, and all the 7 components has some system of meaning, and that system of meaning are being created by one cultural parallel according to its constant, according to its need. And speaking about the perceptive of activities, artifacts that integrate models of action with models of perception, that is what we call cultural constant. A complex of cultural constant is a systematic prism through which a person looks at a work where he must act, and it creates paradigms that determine possibility and conditions of human activity in the world. And it is around the cultural constant that a whole structure of being is built in a human consciousness. It is due to cultural constant that a person obtains an image of surrounding medium, and where all elements of the universe are structured and related with a person himself, and in which a person may act, a person may react, a person may create his own identity. That is called cultural identity of a person, and it is the cultural constant. Now let us go to the translation. What is translation? Nida, you know, we believe, I believe that many persons of the modern age, we believe on the sayings of Nida. So what Nida says, it is translating consists in reproducing in the receptor language the closest natural equivalent of the source language message. First, in terms of meaning, and secondly, in terms of style. Again, the term meaning, the term in terms of meaning, it comes. The meaning, it's closely related with the cultural constants, which has relation with the cultural constants. And cultural constants are always different. That's why it is very difficult to translate the cultural constant. We can translate the cultural universals, but the cultural constants are very difficult to be translated. If you see the model of Nida, then you see that source language is a text, analyze and transfer and restructure. Now the process of restructuring, when we transfer the text, by analyzing the text, we transfer it and we go to restructure. We want to restructure it. Now we lose something. That we are going to lose something. What we lose, that's a psychological aspects of one cultural context. That is that in many times it is the constant. So the translation product, when it comes to in the receptor language, so we restructure it, and the capability of a very good translator, it remains with the capability of restructuring the translation according to the need by maintaining reliability of the text. By reliability of text means by translating the cultural constants in a reliable manner. You cannot translate. I'll show you a few examples from the Assamese text, how some translators are very much successful in translating all these things, but how some translators are missing this particular aspect in translation. So a good translation must always commit abuses. What Philip Lewis said, a good translation must always pay tricks. Okay, fine, abuses and tricks. Let us talk about abuses. What you want to abuse the text, it means you might have to change some particular aspects of one particular target language text. That abuses are to be made. That abuses are to be made. But again, the question, and you will have to play some tricks. That is fine. If you cannot play the tricks, then you cannot be a creative, cannot create a creative translation product. But the maintaining all these things by abusing one particular text, by tackling with us, you again you'll have to deal with the cultural constants. So I want to cite a few examples from the Assamese translations. How people were successful in translating some text, and how the translators were where they remained their translation remained blurred on some perspective, some particular aspects, because of the incapability of retelling the psychological realities of one particular culture, one particular form of meaning, because of incapability of the translator to transmit the message of meaning to another translation, language. You see, this is Hantonu Pulanandon, that is a Sahitya Academy Award-winning novel, and that was translated by one, that was written by Purobi Bormudoy, one great Assamese writer, and that was translated by Ananda Bormudoy. Of course, he is her husband, but he is a very renowned critic of Assamese literature. So, creativity and criticism rarely it works parallelly, but sometimes it happens for the tremendously capable personalities, creative personality. It happens, but how Ananda Bormudoy translated these words, you see, Hikto Ongo Bostro Porihar Kori, Huklo Bostro Poridhan Kori, Teo Ashramastito Mondirot Homal. It is using complex composite words. She is using some Takshama words which are originally from Sanskrit. Prato Hubahona Hek Korise, Teo Hishokolok Hikadan Karjot, Broti Hek Korihe, Teo Hishokolok Hikadan Karjot, Broti Hobo. Now that this translation has been translated to English in this particular form, Bhargav Parashuram changed his weight cloth. Hikto Ongo Brostro. What does it mean? It has Hikto Ongo Bostro. This okay, fine. Literally, it is fine. Weight cloth. Hikto Ongo Bostro. But Ongo Bostro does not means cloth. Cloth means every clothing. So every cloth. It may be a curtain. It may be a tablecloth. It may be anything. It is cloth. Fine. His weight cloth. Okay, we got the meaning. His means whatever he was wearing. But Ongo Bostro means the dress. And weight cloth, hikto, the word hikto has some natural meaning. What it serves, something more than weight. The word weight. Hikto word has some natural, has some kind of meaning which can be which we can feel, which can be felt by the person who read this text. But it cannot be replaced by weight. But he had no other way. So he maintained that his weight cloth wore a dry one. Aru Hikto Angabostro Porihan Husko on Huklo. It is not. It doesn't mean Huklo. It is typing is Huklo. It should be Husko. Husko Bostro Poridhan Kori. Husko Bostro. It has some again. It has some meaning which may not be I'm not telling about the meaning of the dictionary, but it has some psychological meaning which creates some images in our mind which cannot be translated. And what a dry one means it is a very straight kind of, and the husko bostro that has some husko bostro of a saint that has some obviously that has some spirit meaning also, or spiritual meaning. I'm not telling about, again, I'm not telling about dictionary meaning, but it has some kind of feelings which it misses, and the translator has no any other way. So he translated because both the languages are from different sources. You see, originally it is from Sanskrit, it is English. Assamese was Sanskrit and it is from English. So this is and the context is quite different. The language originally the language context of the language speaking people is quite different, so it has no other way. Again, it is a translation of the very early part of 19th century. 12th century. It was the adaptation of Venice, Merchant of Venice. It was Merchant of Venice. It started with the two lines. In truth, I know not why I'm so sad. All of us know this correct. And in Assamese, it was summarized. Its meaning was again redesigned, reconstructed. Okay, fine. It's reconstructed because the cultural parallels, cultural constants which was in Merchant of Venice cannot be literally translated to Assamese. Why it was redesigned, he decided Venice Sohoror Antonio Bassadio name দুই বন্ধু বাস কৰিছিল তেওঁলোকৰ ভিতৰত এনে সদ্ভাৱ আছিল যে তেনে সদ্ভাৱ প্ৰায় দুজন মানুহৰ ভিতৰত দেখা নাযায়. So it was summarized and it was designed just like a tale. So it was the need of the hour. That's why it was translated. So you cannot translate the meaning of the proverbs. So proverbs, all the proverbs has some particular context, and one proverb, it grows on a particular context, social context, historical context. But if context is different, then the meaning will be different. You will you say Kesa borolok jukai lole ga hariboloi tan. It is a slide of Mrityunjoy, award-winning Assamese novel written by Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya. Kathahar bhibirame koisil. So you can dodge the wasp that you have provoked. Kesa borol, he says that it is wasp. Wasp means borol. Wasp in Assamese it is borol, but Kesa borol, it is not wasp. Kesa borol has particular meaning in the mind of Assamese people. You cannot write it in the dictionary. You cannot find it in the dictionary. Well, you cannot go to the dictionary for its literal meaning. But the writer, what he will do? Jukai lole, you have provoked. Jukai lole, it has certain meaning. You have provoked. So you have provoking somebody, and jukai lole, provoking and jukai lole, it has some kind of difference of meaning. Ga hariboloi tan, can't dodge. Kothahar bhibirame koisil. It was Bhibiram who said this. Okay, fine. Last line is fine. It was restructured. The meaning was same. But this Kesa borol, jukai lole, ga haribol tan. These are some examples of a constants which carry some different kind of meaning, which form different kind of meaning, and which cannot be translated. This is one of the remarkable Assamese novel. And Gaur Bat Pale Kuskari Akbole Pahopole. Kermer Kuriutil. You cannot translate it. It was about to be dawn, but the friends woke up. He then what he would do? He wrote it woke up. Just a literal translation. Kermer Kuriutil doesn't mean woke up. Ulongo Ahot Gosor Hirot Ka Ulahalor Sisti Kurisil. Pothorua Boguri Jupuhar Major. Sorai Sirikatie CCISA. Soon the morning crows started to make their shrill noise. CCISA, shrill noise. Atop the banyan tree. Boguri Gos. There is a plum tree and banyan tree. It has difference. But looking towards the need of the target language, it became banyan tree. I want to cite a few lines from one great Assamese short story, famous Assamese short story, that is Kathoni Barir Khat. Saute horu dhou bilake, horu angulide hendur bilak topatop hani korobat momel sabului dhoride. You see, topatop honey, it cannot be translated. It has certain meaning. It cannot be translated, and it is the cultural constant. And momel, it also cannot be translated. But if what the writer, what a translator he did, the small waves slowly disappeared from the vision as if they with their nibble fingers partook the vermilion and ran away to join a soil. It appeared as if somebody suddenly dropped all the vermilion on a dam in great fury. The sky looked like a widow. Okay, kunubai khongot jen gutei hendu khini thekesa mari dashing. That was dashing. Thekera thekesa mari, but he didn't made it down. It appears somebody suddenly dropped all vermilion. He translated it somewhere. This translator, I don't want to say quote him. This translator, he missed this point. It doesn't mean he at least the previous translators about whom I have already told, they couldn't create the same environment, same meaning, but they were trying to recreate a new meaning which is nearer to the self-constant of that particular area. But this particular translation has the translator couldn't create that text which can recreate a new meaning which is nearer to the text, the source text, cultural constant of the source text. That is, saute horu dhobilake horu angulire hendur bilak topato khani korbat momel sabole lord hoide. Kunumai khongot gutei hendur thekesa mari doesn't drop all. It is dashing. Hihotor gat pelai dile. Uka kopalor tiruta egoraki jene lagil. You see, the people of Assam or India who know how a Hindu widow dress, what is the dress, or how a Hindu widow looks like, they know it, and they have certain meaning about a Hindu widow. It cannot be, this meaning cannot be created in any other language other than Indian languages. I'm not telling that English is not Indian language, but it is an Indian language of the post-colonial society. We adopted it, and it is now becoming an Indian language, but it is lagging certain words which cannot create that meaning, which cannot represent that cultural constant. And that's why the Kakopalor Tiruta Goraki and Jenny Lagichil. Just he finished it, looked like a widow, but Ukakopal, empty forehead, he is missing that point, and he recreate the nearer text which can be accepted as a reliable translation. Patmugi aloti by Ziek, I muk dodai boli bate, aru mor agote upoji dangor digol hoi etia phor gaboru. Choalijoni dekhile kune amar nisina dukhiya salsika bhikohu kumar horos choali bolibo. Kumar it is a one kind of caste, one kind of community who has been identified on a basis of their profession, that is a pottery. Profession is in particular some areas only. So in Assam also, Bikohu Kumar Ghor Swali Budibi. So there is no Kumar in English. So think then Horamin or Ghoro Zwari. Horamin, you cannot say that revenue officer, he is translating into the revenue officer. Patmug is Aloti by his daughter. She calls me Dodai, paternal uncle. Dodai, again he is explaining it, paternal uncle. It is rather explaining it here, he could create that image. He could have the capability to create the meaning nearer to that original text, so that we can have a reliable new text in the form of translation. Losing that reliability here. I know when she was born, she has grown up right under my eyes into a fully formed young woman. Looking at her, who will say that she is only a poor porter's daughter? Dukhia Salsika Bhikohu. He is writing it as poor porter, poor. He is translating the word as poor, but poor, the meaning poor, it cannot represent, but he has no alternate. So poor, cannot represent Dukhya Salsiga Bhikkhu only. Dukhya Salsiga Bhikkhu has certain meaning in the mind of Assamese people. So he is replacing the word, okay, fine, that with a poor, but it cannot be translated. So I don't want to cite another poem that is a long, that will need long deliberation. Just at a finishing point, I want to cite one, the title of one book. That is one famous children book, children poetry book. That is Hiali Palegui Rotanpur. Hiali Rotanpur. Rotanpur. The name Rotanpur has some particular meaning, psychological aspect in the mind of people of Assam. Just like Venice in the people West, the merchant of Venice. Okay, Venice cannot create the same image in the mind of people of Assam. Like that, Rotanpur cannot create the same image. Okay, it remained Rotanpur, so it needs something like, just like the translation of merchant of Venice. It is okay, no other way. So we'll have to imagine that meaning. Hiali, what he will do, what the translator will do. Hiali, the word, the female fox. So Hiali, what will be what he will do? The word do not have that image. There is no any such other word in English. So he made it fox. Miss Fox arrived at Rotanpur. He had no any other way. So he made it Miss Fox.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Could you please wind up in 1 minute?
I'm winding up.
Thank
this is the last slide. This is the last slide. So he translated it. So my point is that you see, we cannot translate. We cannot create some literal translation of the culture sense. But the translator must have the capability of recreating reliable text which will be nearer to the cultural constants of the source text. Sometimes some people miss it, some people miss it. Some translator can create this. These are incapabilities, but sometimes some people recreate that translation with tremendous capability, and that text, that translation remains forever like a original text. So we believe that the creation of new text in the form of translation is not only a task of translating something literally, but it is a responsibility of the translator to recreate a translation, recreate a new image, new text by recreating the translation, recreating the cultural nearer image of the recreating some nearer images of the cultural constants of the source language. This is the important point of one translator. He has to be keeping in mind. And with these few words, I thank you all. I want to conclude my speech at this point. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you for a very insightful, interesting presentation, and for introducing to us the idea of cultural constant as one that is model of perception and a prism to look at. You introduced to us and described the untranslatability of this idea of cultural constant and inevitability also of the same. Giving us example from different Assamese texts. I would really like to ask you this very interesting question, that how can the translator avoid or overcome this inescapable phenomena and incorporate more effectively the socio-psychological dimension in the translated version? And if you have come across any effective approach in your own idea of translation in relation to the cultural constant, the idea of cultural constant that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the thing. What I have said some in a very early slides. You see, I'm talking about the reliability of the text. Reliability doesn't means the reliability of data, that in a translation, or reliability of some historical facts in a translation of creative writing. But the reliability means the acceptability of the text in the terms of meaning, not the meaning of the dictionary, but the meaning which creates the images in the mind of the people. So in the mind of the people, what it does, what is in the source language. So you have to recreate some nearer images which is acceptable in the target language. If you cannot create that nearer images, psychological images of one particular text or one particular symbol, then you cannot, one particular vocal symbol, then you cannot create that text. That is the thing. You must have the capacity to create the image nearer to the original text.
Thanks a lot for your answer, sir. Due to time constraint, I think we can only take one question. But we do have some comments in the chat box. So if you can please reply and look. I think Lakshajit sir is also appreciating your presentation. So thanks a lot. It's time that we move on to our next presenter. None other than Ratnotma Das ma'am. So just brief introduction before I hand it over to you, ma'am. Dr. Das is assistant professor at the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi. Along with teaching and supervising scholars, she has a keen interest in the fieldwork and indigenous lore. And for that, in that connection, she has kind of stayed in different interior villages of regions, including Assam, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Sikkim, Kalimpong, Manipur. And she has been working on the cultural lore of Lepcha tribe since 2008. Dr. Das is a creative writer with 2 critically acclaimed books, and she's also the recipient of travel grant for young authors by Sahitya Academy in the year 2016. A known newspaper columnist who writes regularly in newspapers, journals, and magazines, and also an artist. If you she has a keen interest in painting also. So I really invite you, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ruchi. Hokololeke namaskar. Good afternoon. Without taking much time, I'd love to start my presentation directly. My title of my paper is When the Writer Becomes the Translator, Earingham, a Case Study. So to begin with, I have to tell you first who is the writer and what is the text. Here in this presentation, in case of my presentation, the writer or the author is Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya. And the text is Earingham, as I have mentioned in my title. Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya, no need to introduce him to the Assamese readers and audience here, but just a brief line that he is the first Gyanpith Award winner from Assam who won Gyanpith for Mrityunjay, his novel Mrityunjay, and also Sahitya Academy. And he is a very renowned, revered figure in Assamese literature. And the text, Earingham, this is the text, it's a novel based on the Tangkhul Naga community of Manipur, and the backdrop of the novel is the Second World War, and the novel was published in 1960. After 1 year of the publication of the novel, that is in 1961, this novel won the Sahitya Akademi, Central Sahitya Akademi Award. And this was the first Assamese novel to win an Sahitya Akademi Award. Of course, before that, two other Assamese literature also won Sahitya Akademi, but not for novel. So this was the first novel in Assamese to win the prestigious Sahitya Akademi Novel Award. So forget about the awards and all, but any reader of Assamese will admit that this novel is such an iconic novel in Assamese literature that everybody has grown up reading this. And not only Assamese, actually, this novel is like a property of Indian literature. Because it is written in Assamese, that's why I'm using the word Assamese novel. So this is about the author and the novel, very, very briefly, the text and the author. So now let me tell you, the author as a translator. It comes under the introduction also, introducing the author, but I am making a separate point because my focus is to discuss when a writer becomes a translator. Here in Yaringam, I will tell you later, a little bit later, just wait for a few minutes, I'll tell how the writer Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya himself is the translator of Yaringam. So as a translator, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya, he has translated many books from Assamese to other languages and from other languages to Assamese, both the ways, the both two-folded translation process. He has translated Didi Kosambi's very famous introduction to the study of Indian history, that is Bharatar Itihah. He translated into Assamese as Bharatar Itihah. He translated Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls, and he translated as Debo Dundubi Baje Karbabe. So these are from English to Assamese. Other Indian languages, he has translated Tagore's short stories into Assamese under Ekuri Eta Sutigolpo, that means 21 short stories. Then again, he translated Sharat Chandra Sattopadhyay's Porinita from Bengali to Assamese. That means translation from other languages to Assamese. So he has translated from English and from Bangla as well. The other way around, he translated from Assamese to English also, not to any other language, but to English. And this translation includes Yaringam and Mrityunjay as well. Now, here I'd like to tell, maybe some participants are there, some listeners or audience are there from Assam also. So I'd like to tell for all of you that what I'm going to speak now, these are not very easily available information in Assamese literature. Professor Sattakam, if he is there, he will agree. Mitali Madam, if she is there, she will agree that I'm going to give you some information about Yaringam, which are not very easily available. And after, in true sense, researching again and again, searching again and again, researching, I have gathered all this information. So I'll be happy if you please listen to me carefully. Well, so I was talking about his translation from Assamese to English, where there are two novels, Mrityunjay and Yaringam. And in today's presentation, my focus will be on Yaringam, a case study. So, well, the translation of Mrityunjay was published by Starling Publishers, Delhi in 1982. This novel won Gyanpith Award, as I have mentioned just before some time, in 1979. Yaringam was published much later. I'll discuss separately because today's discussion will be on Yaringam only. So this is how I can discuss Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya, the writer, as a translator himself. This is a sort of background of the author as a translator. Now again, I'll come to the point of translating text. If some of you were present in the beginning of this seminar yesterday, when I was briefing the concept note of the webinar, or I was introducing you to the theme of the webinar, I told that the translation can be threefolded, from the source language to the target language, of course. And when the source language is Assamese, that is a regional Indian language, a modern Indian language, some people say, but whatever, MIA or NIA, Neo-Indo-Aryan language. When the source language is Assamese, the translation can be from Assamese to English or any other foreign language, or it can be from Assamese to any other Indian language. Thirdly, it may be from Assamese to any other indigenous or tribal languages, maybe from Northeast India, maybe from all over India, any indigenous language. So from source language text to target language text, in case of Yaringam, there are many translations of, in case of Yaringam, there are many texts translated into different Indian languages and into English as well. When we speak about different Indian languages, almost all the major Indian languages, Yaringam has been translated. I'll name a few. Hindi, Mahendranath Dubey, Prajakaras, Urdu, Balraj Varma, Lokras, Tamil, Kerosene Pakyamutut under the title Karal Mukkal. Telugu, there are two translations of Yaringam. One is by Amarendra under the title Zanabahini, and another one was published by Sahitya Akademi, Narasimha Shastri. Again, Marathi Shanti Salake translated it as Lokanshu Raja, Gujarati Phulabai Patel as Lokanu Raja, and Bengali Yaringam was translated to Bengali by Sukumar Vishwas under the title Yaringam itself. Here comes my second point, the name of the novel Yaringam. For you who have not read Yaringam, who are not familiar with the novel, it may sound like a very strange word, Yaringam, something like that. But to Assamese people also, it is a strange word, Yaringam. It's not an Assamese word. This is actually a Tangkhul Naga word. Well, of course, those who have read Yaringam and very much familiar with the novel, that word is not unfamiliar. But as a word, it is a Tangkhul Naga word, Yaringam. Let me discuss a little bit. Yaringam, name of the novel. Just now I have mentioned the other translations of Yaringam. Have you noticed all the translated title are something like Prajakaras, Lokaras, Lokanuras, Lokanchuraza? That means people's government, people's rule. Almost all the translated versions are translated like Rise or Hachon or people's rule. In fact, it was mentioned inside the novel also. When the protagonist character Rishang was talking to Kutingla, his wife, he was telling that I'm going to name my son Yaringam. Then Kutingla asked, what is that? He says that is people's rule. But Yaringam doesn't mean people's rule only. It has many different meanings. And the author, the novelist, explained the meanings in the beginning also. Yaringam means some prosperity. Yaringam means it declares the status of someone, something very prestigious and something someone is proud of. But why all the translations are translated as Prajakaras, Lokanuras? Because that is the literal translation. Again, the most important point. When the author becomes the translator, he is very careful choosing the translated word, particularly the title of the novel. So only Bengali translation is kept as it is as Yaringam, but the English translation done by Virendra Kumar Bhattacharya himself kept as it is as Yaringam, which was published by Christian Literature Society in 1984, Guwahati. The name was the same, Yaringam. But interestingly, in 2003, the same novel was published by Katha, New Delhi, under the title Love in the Time of Insurgency. Doesn't it ring a bell? This is the book, Love in the Time of Insurgency. The love is written in a bold letter, and the insurgency, love and insurgency, both are very attractive title, attractive words, and it rings a bell, something like Love in the Time of Cholera. I have some problem in this name. Why Love in the Time of Insurgency, and why Virendra Kumar Bhattacharya did it? Because both the translations were done by the author, the same person. But later I came to know that the second title was not given by the author, but the publishers only. And the publishers, of course, with due respect, I must have to mention that publishers will definitely see their business. And a name like Yaringam may be less attractive for them. Maybe a title like Love in the Time of Insurgency that will attract more buyers, not readers. I'm using the word buyers of the novel. So this is the basic about the author. When an author becomes a translator, Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya, the novelist, he himself translated, and 2 versions of Yaringam are there. Now let me tell you that I have been teaching this novel in translated English translation to my MPhil students. I'm not sure whether they are present right now or not. Because the students are non-Assamese, or they cannot read and speak and write Assamese. So I have no option than take help of English translation. So I take help from the Katha translation. I have no option. I teach them the English translation, Love in the Time of Insurgency, because the Yaringam, the first translated version of Yaringam is not available in the market. I have been telling in Assam, I have been writing in different places that the translation should be available. Anyway, so I have to teach in English and the Katha publication. Now I will tell you how the title was different. Here I have to tell a little bit my personal thing, very little bit. Actually, decades back, I did my PhD. I completed my PhD under Professor Patnaik sir. So my PhD was related to, it was on the depiction of tribal life in Poroja and Yaringam. So while researching on Yaringam, I met Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya's wife, Madam Binita Bhattacharya ma'am. Because Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya passed away in 1997. So I have no option meeting his wife. So ma'am was Baidu was very nice to me. She was a simple, nice lady. And when I spoke to her and I told her my intention that I'm doing this and that, she trusted me so much that she gave me the last copy of Yaringam that was with her. She said that you can make a photocopy and please return it to me. This is the last copy available. Of course, I photocopied it, which is with me, which I read very thoroughly, and I returned the only copy to her, and that copy is not available. But now, again, while researching somewhere this here and there, I found that there is a book club in Manipur named as Pasei Book Club, and some copies of the first translation of Yaringam is still there, and people are still reading. Anyway, so this is how the name was changed, and Binita Bhattacharya madam told me that it was not such translation. It was given by the translator only. I don't think this is a justice to the novel. That if you see the business, you should not. Perhaps they see the business only. Again, okay. Now the word Yaringam, I have told that this is people's rule. But as I told you just before some time that this is an unfamiliar word to Assamese people also. Again, I will tell you a very small personal experience. When I got a job in Delhi University, I'm sorry I'm sharing personal experience, but this is the only way I can make it related. So when I got a job in Delhi University way back in 2008, my name and my phone number was appeared in the Delhi University telephone directory, and I was overwhelmed. I was very happy. I was going through the pages, and suddenly I was stopped. I saw a name, Dr. Y.S. Yaringam, with his phone number and email. I was so surprised that is it a name also? I knew that Yaringam is a name of a novel only. Can it be a name of a person also? Then immediately I contacted the person, and yeah, my guess was right. He is from Northeast, my neighbor district Manipur, my neighbor state Manipur, and he teaches in Delhi University in African Studies department. We became friends. We started talking. Then I came to know that Yaringam is a common name in Tangkhul Nanga society. In fact, the chief minister, 4 times chief ministers of Manipur, Chang Kesing, who is the real hero of Yaringam, his son's name is Yaringam. That was a totally different chapter. I don't have time today to speak all about my experience. How did I find Rishang Kesing, the real hero of Yaringam? Today I'm not going to discuss, but this is how I came to know that Yaringam is a common name in their society. So when the author becomes the translator, he will definitely be very careful choosing the name, choosing the title, everything. Okay, I think Ruchi will remind me. I have to look at the time also, because this Okay, so this novel is so close to my heart that I can go on speaking about the novel. So again, I'll come to my point that when an author becomes a writer, is it better if the author, the writer himself translates his work, or it is better if someone else, a professional translator or maybe an experienced translator, translates the piece of literature? My answer is it depends whether the author has the command in both the languages or not. Not having command in both the languages is not a disqualification. But in case of Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya, he had very good command in both the languages. In fact, 3 languages, Assamese, Bengali, and English. That's why we got the fine outcome of Yaringam and the other translations. So in case of Yaringam, it is a successful translation. But sometimes the translator becomes more efficient and the translated version becomes more, it's better than the original one. Yeah, it happens sometimes. The translated version is accepted by the reader even more than the original one. That also happens, but that is not applicable in case of Yaringam, because he has the command, he knows the cultural context and knows the language, and that's how we got the piece of good literary translation piece. Okay, I have lots of examples from both the Yaringam, both the translated version, where I can go on giving, but I have to stop myself. But all I can say that both the translated versions of Yaringam are almost the same with little difference. For example, the second version published by Katha, there are some chapter divisions, and again attractive chapter division, like 1946 June, mid-June 1946, that is the time of the conflict, the communal conflict in Bengal, that was described in the novel also. So some like this, it is the chapters are divided, which is not there in the original work, which is not there in the first translation of Yaringam. So I have selected few examples, but I think I should give only one example here, and I will discuss one very interesting point. That is, when a text is translated from one language to other language, the translator doesn't only translate the language, he or she has to translate the culture also. And translating in culture is not that easy. The words, the context, everything is very critical. In that situation, most of the translators, they take help of using footnote or endnote or some reference. If there is a word that is not possible to be translated, the translator keep it as it is and give a footnote. But in case of Yaringam, after reading thoroughly, I have seen that Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya didn't use any footnote. And I was surprised as a reader that he is such a wonderful writer, a wonderful translator, that even without any footnote, the reader will understand the meaning. I'll give you only one example. May I please read it from the book? Okay. Before that, I'll tell you the situation. This is the last point, Ruchi. I hope you will allow me. The situation is Sarangla, one major character in Yaringam, is in conversation with Cutting, another character. Cutting and Sarangla, they're taking some tea and talking. And then after having tea, Cutting says, I have to go to the field. I have to go to the paddy field. And Sarangla says, Cutting, I'll also go with you. I have to take Hokcha and Kasentenai for the farmers. Here, usually what other translators do, the word Hoksa and Kasentenai, they will just put a star mark and keep a footnote, what is Hoksa and Kasentenai. What Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya did, he doesn't use footnote. This is very interesting. The next sentence is self-explanatory. Sarangla replied with a smile. She took a sopkai, again another Tangkhul word. She took a sopkai made of bamboo lying in the corner of the house. So when he says a sopkai is made of bamboo lying in the corner of a house, that means it is something. It may be something like a basket. No need of any footnote, no need of any explanation. Then the next line, she filled the sopkai with packets of pork and sauce made of potato mashed with red chili, dry fish, and salt. This explains that she is going to take this food item to the field for the farmers, because the first sentence says, I have to take hokcha and kasantainai. So this is the explanation, that she is going to take hokcha and kasantainai, this food item, in the bamboo basket to the field. And the next line, then she placed the kasai carefully on her head, balanced the sokkai on it, and left with cutting. I don't need to tell that kasai is maybe some sort of cloth that balances the bamboo basket, and she is going to the field. Look, this is the beauty of the translation. And this is possible because Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya is a wonderful writer and experienced translator, and because of his experience, his proximity with the Tangkhul Naga people. Because if we look at his background, he was there in the village, in the Manipur, in a remote Manipur village, and he was teaching in a village school for 1.5 years, staying with the Naga community people. So because hearing him is the outcome of his experience. So there are so many examples in the whole book like this, but I have given only one example. This is how he has translated Yaringam into English without using footnote. Maybe in 1 or 2 places he has used some reference to explain something, but no footnote is given for any word. And interestingly, everything is understood, and that's not possible for an ordinary translator. So this is what happens when a wonderful writer becomes a translator. And that unfortunate thing happens when the translator publishes the book after his demise under a different title. And that's my personal view, of course. So to sum up my question, is it better if the writer becomes the translator or not? The answer already I have given. It depends on the situation. Readers and critics' duty. Of course, it is our duty, the readers and critics' duty, to evaluate and improve the next edition if there is any change or any scope of improvement. Publishers' duty to evaluate the text before they go for publication. Sahitya Akademi does that. Before publishing, they usually go for some confidential evaluation process. But this is how, and of course, if the writer is alive, the writer's permission and everything, it is needed in case of translation. So with these words, I would like to conclude my presentation because I'm given only 20 minutes. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful presentation, ma'am. It's a Assamese literary classic text, and it was really lovely to hear you, especially the idea that you mentioned about translating the culture. That was, I think, resonated in Professor Satyakambo Thakur's presentation also, and how Birendra Kumar Bhattacharya as a writer and as a translator, he was familiar, and his proximity with the context of Naga culture, the Tangkhul Nagas, really contributed in the making of the text itself. Now it's time that we take questions. Our first question was actually by Professor P.C. Patnaik, sir, but he mentions that you have already answered that question in your presentation. There is one comment by Raina. And next question is by Basudev Das, sir. He's praising your presentation. And also he's asking one question. The question is, he's saying that we know the main character in the text is Rishang, and will you please throw some light on it? Another thing that he mentioned is that there are some similarities with a Bengali novel, Jagari, by Satinath Bhaduri. And he's asking if you can please highlight about this comparison and also the character Rishang.
Thank you. I know Basudev Das. I think he is a very known translator who translates a lot from Assamese to Bengali. He's a very known name. In fact, there was a paper today in the first session. So thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. And coming to your point, yeah. The first, Rishang, the character Rishang. I told that because of paucity of time, today I won't discuss about Rishang, but okay, I'll be very brief and I'll tell you. I, being a voracious reader of Assamese literature, being a student of Assamese literature. I read Yaringam in my early teen days, and I reread it several times. I read many articles, books written on and about Yaringam, particularly when I started doing my PhD. But nowhere it was written about Risang. Only one or two sentences maybe that the story is based on real story, the characters are real, that much only, nothing more than that. But I told you the story, the personal story, that I was turning the pages of telephone directory of Delhi University 2008, and I got the name Professor A.S. Yaringam, and I came to know about the name Yaringam. I came to know that Risang's son's name is Yaringam. This is how my journey started in search of Risang. In fact, I wrote an article in Prantik, the Assamese fortnightly, very recently about in search of Risang, about my experience. So I started finding Risang, the character, and finally, after lots of effort, finally I managed to get an appointment with Risang. And to my utter surprise, Risang was none other than four-time Chief Minister of Manipur, who was still alive during that time, who lived in Delhi only, in the parliament, in the MP's quarter in Talkotra Road. So somehow I got an appointment, and I requested Professor Patnaik, my guru, that would you accompany me, because sir read the English translation of Yaringam thoroughly, and he was very excited to meet Risang. We both went, and we met Risang. And you can imagine my surprise when Risang came out from the room. The character of Risang, the novel which was published in 1960, and I met Risang in 2009, I guess. So he was old. Then he said, meet Kutingla. Meet your Kutingla. This is a sentence he used in English, in Assamese. Kutingla. In the novel, Risang and Kutingla, they are love interest, and later they married. And in real life, they got married. In real life, their son's name is Yaringam. They saw me pictures, and I took picture of the pictures. These are with me, the treasured possession of mine. So this is how, in brief, that Risang was there. But Risang is no more now. He passed away in 2017. So this is about Risang. Mr. Basudev Das sir, I hope you are happy and satisfied with my answer about Risang. And about Sitanath Waduri's novel, yeah, there are some similarities, but not that much. I think it's not the right platform to talk more and more about the comparison, but that much only I can tell you. It's not exactly the same. I think we can discuss it in another platform. So I hope that's enough. And is there any other question, Ruchi?
Thank you, ma'am. You can see, ma'am, we have lots of words of appreciation. The chat box is filled with that. If you can please check that out. And we will, because we have time constraint, we'll move on to our next presentation.
Thank you.
So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Dr. Judy Datta, ma'am. And Dr. Judy Datta is working in Tezpur University as assistant professor in Assamese, and her book Ethnic Worlds in Select Indian Fiction was published by Sage in the year 2014. She has translated the text titled Kocharethi, Araya Woman in 2018 into Assamese. The original text is in Malayalam. Her areas of interest include creative writing, regional fictions of India, ethnic literature and translation. And today she is presenting on the topic Problem of Equivelance, a study of two Assamese novels in English translation. I welcome you, ma'am. The stage is all yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Ruchi. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Very loud and clear. You can please continue with your presentation. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ruchi. So I think without much delay, I should start my presentation. I have selected the topic of my presentation as Problems of Equivalence, a study of two Assamese novels in English translation. So what we understand, traditionally, it has been believed that translation simply means communicating the same message in another language. Translation of a literary text cannot be a word-to-word rendering, as it is not a straightforward mechanical process. It must take into account constraints that we have already. We are aware of this. In fact, Professor Borthakur and Dr. Ratnava Das, the ideas that they are dealing with, I will be discussing on these also. So we are talking about these constraints. The translation must take into account constraints that include the context, the rules of grammar, and grammar of two languages, and their writing conventions and their idioms. So a literary text is born, we can say emerged in a language which is not only made up of sounds and signs, but of culture and history. And therefore, a literary work is created within a plurality of elements. And that is what Lefebvre considers the translation and its influence on culture. And he says, I quote, the translation function in a given culture in a given time, unquote. So when we talk about translation, we mean transference of a text of a particular language into another language. Translation of a text is believed to be quote unquote good when it retains the actual meaning of the source language text. And according to Alexander Fraser Tytler, that he has, I'd like to quote again, that is the best translation, that in which the merit of the original text is so completely apprehended and as strongly felt by a native of the country to which the text belongs, as it is by those who speak the language of the original work, unquote. So translation studies as an academic discipline has gained an honored place today. Translation theorists prescribe few principles earlier that on how to translate a text into another language. In early days, the focus was basically on how to translate. But in the course of time, many translation theorists, I believe, that they have developed many new ideas and philosophy behind each work of translation. Today, the theories focus not only on how to translate, but on who and why and when and what to translate. And in my discussion here today, I would like to discuss how this who and why and the process of finding the answers of who and why plays an important role in translation. The idea of who and why problematizes the conventional understanding of fidelity and opens up new issues related to translation. Theorists, translation theorists are of the opinion that translation will be quote unquote appropriate, good and valid when it is faithful to the original. And here comes the issue of equivalence and fidelity. But when we talk about equivalence, what kind of equivalence are we talking about? Is it about semantic equivalence, linguistic equivalence, or ideological equivalence? And how to arrive at linguistic equivalence between the source language and the target language? For my discussion here, I have chosen two Assamese novels, as I have already mentioned, and these are translated into English. And one of these is a self-translated novel. Already Dr. Das has mentioned about self-translation. I have also tried to find out some answers that whether it is good to translate the translation to be done by the writer herself or himself. So just let me talk about this, that one is the self-translated novel by the author, by the novelist herself, and the other is a novel by Yese Dorje Thongsi, a Sahitya Academy Award-winning novel. We all know, from Assam, people know that. And this Yese Dorje Thongsi, he writes in Assamese. He is educated in Assamese medium school and he writes in Assamese. Gyanpit Award-winning Assamese writer Mamuni Roysam Goswami's Dotal Hatir Uye Khwa Hauda is translated into English by herself as the most eaten howdah of the Tusker. And Yesedarje Thongsi's Mono Mukhor Hidoi is translated into English by Devarshi Prasad Nath as Silent Lips, Murmuring Hearts. Yesedarje Thongsi, as I already said, that he is born to a Serdupken community, writes in Assamese, and Indira Goswami, who is popularly known as Mamani Rosham Goswami, she is from Assam, writes in Assamese. And both these novels that I have chosen to discuss, written in Assamese, while Goswami's novel is written in Kamrupi dialect, that is a dialectical variation in Assamese. In Thongsi's novel, when the tribal characters talk to people from the plains, they use a sort of pidgin Assamese. So as such, both the novels share almost similar linguistic characteristics. We can say that to establish the non-homogeneous nature of Assamese identity and Assamese society, Mamuni Rasam Goswami wrote Dotal Hatir Uyekhua Howdah in Kamrupi dialect, which is not easy to understand by all Assamese people. In her preface to the novel, she mentions, she already, she talks about that, and she mentions here that as the original novel was written mostly in the Kamrupi dialect, it would have been difficult to get it translated by any other person except the author herself. Not many people from Assam are conversant with this dialect. Besides, many words of this particular dialect have now become obsolete, unquote. So in the preface, she said this. And Devarshi Prasad Nath writes about the purpose of translation. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are. Please continue.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, come to my right here. Okay. So Devarshi Prasad Nath is right about the purpose of this translation of the novel from Assamese into English, that the new generation student, I quote from this text, that the new generation students from Arunachal are utterly oblivious of the merit of the writer. I have heard some of my students express their frustration at their inability to read Dai and Thongsi. Dai is Lume Dai, who is another novelist from Arunachal who writes in Assamese. And I felt that it was my obligation to translate at least one novel and make it available for my students here. So it is important to note here, I believe, that both the translators have different purpose of translating the novel into English. And there are some striking dissimilarities in both the works of translation. Though there are similarities in the use of language of the original text that I have already mentioned, that Mamani Racham Goswami's novel was in Kamrupi dialect, and Yesedarje Thongsi's novel was written in pidgin-like conversation and dialect. The language in the English translation of the two texts is entirely different. And before I quote from the text, let me draw your attention to the concept of linguistic equivalence that is supposed to be maintained by the translator. In certain cases, if the text is translated linguistically by word-for-word translation, it might result in a completely different kind of effect. I would like to quote from the translator's preface of Silent Lips, Murmuring Hearts. So here, in the process of translating Mono Ut Mukhor Hidoi, there were some very important decisions that I had to take as a translator. In the novel, when the tribal characters talk to people from the plains, they use a sort of pidgin Assamese that is actually still very much prevalent in Arunachal. I felt that I had two options. I could either retain this pidgin-like language or use a well-structured language while mentioning the fact that the characters were talking in broken Assamese. Let me just go a little bit. I'll skip a little bit here. Okay. I felt that it would make it sound what I was looking for, that as a translator, it would make it sound as if the characters belong to the colonized class of babus of the 19th century. I felt that it was very important to situate the novel in Arunachal Pradesh of the 1950s. Okay, and then, okay, this, I think it will enough. So in the pursuit of maintaining linguistic equivalence, there is always a fear of losing the meaning of the text. If the textual structure of the source language is kept in English translation, there is a fear of misinterpretation. There is a fear of misreading of the meaning. As such, more focus on linguistic faithfulness, more focus on fidelity would result in literal translation in certain cases. And this proves to be an aesthetic disaster for the readers. Let me draw an example of Thogi. Thogi in the most eaten howdah of the Tashka, which is translated as tray. The Assamese readers, Assamese people, they know what is Thogi. Okay, so when it is translated as tray, it is translated as tray in the most eaten howdah of the Tashka, but the cultural value that is associated with the word, I believe, cannot be retained by translating it as tray. And I believe that it is the same case when that dheki is translated as the pounding horse. Okay, now in the preface of the original Assamese novel, Mono Ut Mukhar Hriday, Thongsi says, which I have tried to translate, that due to the need of the story and setting, two types of languages have been used by the same character. Yes, Thongsi himself wrote this. When non-Assamese and tribal characters talk to other tribal characters, then they use broken Assamese. But when tribal characters talk to other tribal characters, then they but when tribal characters talk to characters from the same tribe, then they use chaste Assamese. Depending upon the situation, even Dilip Soikia is a character of the novel who is Assamese. He is made to talk in broken Assamese in different situations. So to adjust himself with the inhabitants of the region of Arunachal Pradesh, or to make himself understood, Dilip Soikia has to speak in broken Assamese. Thongsi does this. He does this to use the language very realistically. But if such broken structure of language is retained in English translation, it would not produce the same effect in the native English reader. Linguistic equivalence and faithfulness to the source language seem to be meaningless in such situations. In both the novels, the language of narration was different from that of the conversation among the characters. As it has already been said in the preface of the Mono Ut Mukhar Hriday, that when non-Assamese and tribal characters talk to other tribal characters, then they use broken Assamese. But when tribal characters talk to characters from the same tribe, they use chaste Assamese. So in Howdah, the language of the characters is not Kamrupi dialect, but the narrator's language is of quote-unquote standard Assamese. The purpose of Goswami's self-translation is semantic clarification and an urge to reach a wider readership. Interestingly, the case of this point of wider readership, even in Thongsi's novel, Thongsi also expresses the reason behind his choice of Assamese language for his writing. In an interview, he says that, I have quoted it here, that from practical point of view, Assamese is the language which is accessible to majority of our people. People coming down from the hills to the plains interact, exchange views and feelings through Assamese language. To reach out to a wider readership, the text of the novel should be translated in a way that is easily understandable for the native English reader. In such cases, if focus is shifted to linguistic equivalence or of retaining cultural weightage, there is a fear of distorting the meaning of the original text. In her translation of the novel, Indira Goswami's The Moth-Eaten Howdah of the Tusker, the writer, the translator, I mean, Indira Goswami tries to be more authentic and original and wants to be colored with local flavor as well. She adds a foreword and reference at the end. The reference explains, as already mentioned by Dr. Das, Dr. Tama Das, that it explains all the italicized words and concept of traditional Assamese, particularly the South Kamrupi culture and rituals, which are used in the text. Now I will try to throw some light on the self-translation. I like to quote that Queretuline Harder, while considering fidelity as an essential element in translation, this famous Urdu writer, Queretuline Harder, is of the opinion that in case of self-translation, the writer, translator, has the liberty to change and recreate the text. So I'd like to quote Haider here, that a translator has to be faithful to the text. And she doesn't have the freedom to make changes as it is somebody else's text. It is about, if it is somebody else's text, then the translator doesn't have the freedom to make changes. Okay, then I being the writer, that is Haider said that I being the writer can do so. I do not merely translate, I rewrite. And I recreate with the English knowing people in mind. Okay, this was with an interview with Taki Ali Mirza. And then this declaration about self-translation suggests that while translating, a creative writer makes his or her own rules. He can make additions and omissions whenever he feels. He can take the liberty, he or she can take the liberty to make structural and other deviations from the original text. Dr. Borthakur has already mentioned Eugene A. Nida's concept. So Nida talks about dynamic equivalence. And I believe Nida's concept of dynamic equivalence can aptly be applied for quote unquote proper translation. For understanding the actual meaning of a text, Nida focused on the possibility of equivalence. But along with that, he developed a model based on Chomsky's system of deep structure, surface structure of language vis-a-vis source language, target language relation. And Manjit Borua has said something very important here. I think that can rightly be applied here. I quote, the translation, the fundamental argument of Nida was that from the surface structure of source language, the translator has to move into its deep structure and then find the equivalent of the source language deep structure in the deep structure of target language. Therefore, the target language can be developed into its surface structure. Nida argued that through this process, a scientific equivalence between the source language and target language can be arrived at, unquote. To me, Nida's concept of dynamic equivalence reflects an acceptance of ideological and semantic equivalence, along with linguistic equivalence. But of course, this is easier said than done, for it involves a lot of difficulties. According to Nida, translation should be dynamic equivalence, should be of dynamic equivalence and non-formal equivalence. And dynamic equivalence can be arrived at only through the process of deep structure, surface structure, interlanguage relations. I'd like to mention Prafula Dr. Goswami here to justify Nida's point. To justify Nida's point here, that Goswami also says something very interesting. Goswami says that though English has a quote-unquote richer vocabulary, in some cases, I quote, when the material to be translated is imaginative in character, considerable difficulty crops up. Translation of proverbial sayings is almost impossible, for the effect of proverbs and maxims depends on play up in words as well as rhyme. An example of a proverb that comes to my mind now, that Rome was not built in a day. That is a proverb which in Assamese is generally translated as Bhukute Koltu Nopoke. The literal translation is,
Excuse me,
yeah.
Please, if you could wind up into 2 minutes, we'll then take
Okay,
up questions.
yeah,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll try to. So what I thought that that this proverb, that Bhukute Koltu Nopoke, the literal translation would be a banana is not ripened by a single blow. So when we translate it into English, we cannot go for literal translation. When translated into English, it is done as Rome was not built in a day. So the idea is that its meaning in the deep structure of source language and target language can remain same due to the reality of universal language. So this, I think I cannot explain again. That is some skills, ideas of universal language, universal grammar, that is a different point. But P.D. Goswami has given some other example also. So I would like to just sum up quickly that P.D. Goswami has given some example of his own translation to show how it was difficult for him to be faithful to the original Assamese text. So for one thing, it was not possible in English. He said that to suggest the cultural connotation that some of the expressions possess. And for him that he has given the instance of homonia. And he says that, oh, my fellow, is a poor substitute for the term homonia. And he has written on this, that language as it is rooted in culture and in accordance with the type of culture involved, one language may be highly differentiated in one field experience, while the other is not. So dynamic equivalence places emphasis on naturalizing or domesticating of source language in target language text. It can also be termed as, you can say, paraphrasing. So thus, I believe that the translator has to be acutely aware of the difficulty of maintaining semantic and ideological equivalence in addition to linguistic equivalence. Problem of equivalence persists in almost every work of translation. The problem is not merely of linguistic equivalence, but of cultural and ideological too. So I believe the text I have chosen for discussion here explain the issues, the problems of equivalence. So the saying that the best translation is perhaps a kind of recreation that very well substantiates Nida's concept of dynamic equivalence. And I would prefer, now I would like to conclude by quoting P.D. Goswami again, that this he believes that recreation, this might necessitate dropping certain portions which may prove ambiguous or without much contemporary relevance. This matter of contemporary relevance is not altogether unimportant. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. It was really nice to hear you, especially about issues related to not just problems, but possibilities within the larger area of equivalence. And you also talked about self-translation and the creative, not just creative space within that, but also restrictions and limitations associated with it. I think it's time that we take questions now. So the first question is by Anabi Nath. The question to you is that, do you think, sorry for my pronunciation, do you think Mon Un Mukhar Hridoy is an equivalent title, especially the word murmuring for Mukhar? Yes, ma'am, this is the question, and also words of appreciation for you, for your paper.
Thank you, Jahnavi Nath, for the question. see, as I know that the how this title was selected and how it was decided, so I can say that it's not about whether it is equivalent or not. Rather, it is the decision of both the writer and the translator. So it's not only, this is not the decision of the translator only. So in fact, there are some points which I don't think that I can publicly express all this, but this murmuring for Mukhar is, as you have raised it well, that yeah, it was a word that the writer wants to be kept as title of the novel. That much I can say. Okay. Thank
right,
you.
ma'am.
I think you got the answer. Yeah.
I hope that you answered the question. Okay, ma'am. Next question is by Dr. Dhurjyoti Sharma, sir. He asks, if the translator introduces new elements into or changes, however slight, the texture of the original, can we then refer to the translation more as a rewriting or retelling?
Okay, thank you, Dhurjyoti Sharma, for your question. I believe that it is about introducing new element. So in all the cases, we do not we cannot say that it is rewriting. Of course, translation itself is rewriting. That way it is true. But it should not change the whole meaning. You are talking about texture. So texture is, I think, a slightly more technical term that way. So it should not change the meaning. And that is why I have talked about this surface structure and deep structure. So that way, like, it's not about changing the meaning, but translation, as I already said, that it is already for many theories that it is almost it is rewriting. It is not only about the self-translator, but it is for others also. Even I can just give an example of, if you permit, I can give an example of my translation of this Malayalam novel into Assamese. There is a word sittapan. I have mentioned it in the beginning of the text, that sittapan is a word which in English translation is written that father's elder brothers or younger brother's son. But while reading the text again and again, I understood that it is not only father's younger brother's son. That means that English word is cousin, but sittapan is kept as it is. So what I believe, that I thought that in some cases it is Mamar Lora, it is Khurar Lora. That means my maternal uncles and paternal uncle's son. So in that case, like, I can change it. Though it is not written in English, I have translated it from English into Assamese. So in English, it is kept as a sittapan. But I could have translated it if I knew that, okay, it is Mamar Lora or it is Khurar Lora. So what I believe, that if I had known this Malayalam language, then I could have done it that way. So in that case, I don't think that it's recreating, it's rewriting. It's not that, as you say, that it's not bringing new element, but it is, sometimes we have to do it, but of course rewriting, yes. But it's, I think there is a slight difference between rewriting and recreating, retelling. Okay, so rewriting or recreating is okay for me that way. I hope that that is okay. That answer is okay for you.
Okay, ma'am. As you can see in the chat box, we have words of appreciation for your presentation. One more question by Barasa Sarma. If you could please give some advice to the future translators, the young translators, for maintaining the beauty and meaning of the original text.
Thank you, Barasa Sarma. That first thing, let me tell you that I love translation. I don't think that I will be that I'm in a position to give advice. But anyway, I believe that the thing is that when you love something, when you do something, try to be honest to your work, whether it is translation, whether it is other work, that is a different thing. But when you are honest to your purpose, that why you are translating. I like that novel. For me, like I am repeating again that my own experience, so sorry for that, these personal things I am discussing again, but I liked it and I wanted that it should be translated in English because into Assamese, because the people of Assam should know that a society which is so far in the sense that many Assamese people are unaware of a society that is the Malay community, but it is so similar to us in so many matters. So I thought that somehow I'll have to do it. The people will have to understand that society, that it is away from us geographically, but it is so close to us. So that intention should be there, I believe. And when you try to do it, try to be honest in your attempt and try to do as much as possible. The meaning should be same. You should not change the meaning. And for that, sometimes, as I have quoted Popular Dr. Goswami here, for some time you have to leave some unnecessary portions, you have to add something, whether it is, of course, rewriting in that way. So you can do it. Okay, that is what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was lovely to hear you. You brought in such lovely insights into this very interesting topic. Thanks for your time, ma'am. We look forward to hear you sometime in future also. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's time that we move on to our okay, ma'am. Thank you. It's time that we move to our next presenter. Our next speaker is Mr. Aruni Kashyap, sir. Welcome, sir. He is an assistant professor of creative writing at the University of Georgia, Athens, and he's a writer and translator, author of a collection of short stories titled His Father's Disease, and the novel titled The House with 1,000 Stories. He has translated from Assamese and also introduced a celebrated Indian writer, Indira Goswami ma'am, and her last work of fiction. His stories, poems, essays have appeared in reputed platforms like the Boston Review, The Guardian UK, and also the New York Times. He has received poetry awards, and also he has won the Charles Wallace India Trust Scholarship for Creative Writing at the University of Edinburgh. We welcome you, sir. Great honor to have you with us. Stage is all yours. Over to you.
What a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Ruchi. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be here, and I can see some familiar faces in the middle of black squares, such as Mitaliba, who is very silent at this point. So, and I'm sure Dr. Ratundama Das and or Pahiba, who I call invited me, is also somewhere lurking around. It's very strange, but this is 2020. I actually want to sort of change or tweak the title of my paper a little bit. And I'm going to talk about contemporary Assamese literature in translation and overview. But actually, in last night when I was writing my paper, and I thought I should retitle my paper as Contemporary Assamese Literature in Translation, What Needs to Change? So this paper is mostly about what needs to change in the practice of translation from Assam. In some ways, this is also like a call for a change or sort of manifesto. Manifesto is a very radical word, but I'm going to still use it in a tongue-in-cheek way. And manifesto for writers and publishers and editors and translators who work in the business of bringing Assamese literature from Assam to the rest of the world for others who can't read Assamese to read. I just want to bring into focus how currently translation is done on the basis of two things in Assam, actually. Whenever I wanted to translate, people used to say, who is the writer and why are you translating them? So reputation and also like awards became very important sort of markers, people who were highly reputed, people who got a lot of awards. These were the writers initially translated. Also, we have to remember that there are very few translators from Assam. So in a way, they chose these writers because outside Assam, when you want to persuade an editor to publish a writer from Assam, it was very important that the writer had a strong reputation. They won some awards. So awards, reputation, these are the two key factors that actually decided who would get translated. So as a result, there are a handful of translators. And as a result, what happens is that not everybody gets awards, like 1 or 2 people get awards every year. So as a result, what happened is that less and less writers from Assam were translated, and only a certain kind of writers were already sort of supported by the establishment. I think this is something that majorly needs to change. And this is something that I have been working towards a very long time. For example, I translated one of the stories called No Man's Land almost 12 years ago for a magazine called Jatra. It was a journal of literature and culture from Assam that was published with support from Sahitya Academy and published from the Northeast Foundation in Christian Bosti, Guwahati. I was an assistant editor when I was a college student. I was invited to be an assistant editor in that magazine. And I translated No Man's Land by Onodha Khomra Pujari, who is a very popular writer, but at the same time, at that time, when I'm talking about 2005, 2007, I can't remember the exact date. At the time, she was not very critically acclaimed, but she was immensely popular. So a lot of people told me, why are you translating? She's more of a popular writer. But I thought that her short story, No Man's Land, was very, very important because it was talking about the futility of borders that writers like Amitabh Ghosh had spoken about already almost 20 years ago in Indian literature. And No Man's Land, I think, is still one of the most important stories that is ever written about Assam, because so many concerns about Northeast, so many concerns about Assam is related to borders and belonging. So I wanted to translate this story. I did not have the language then as an undergraduate student to actually support my translation, but now I do. So I'm saying that there is a challenge when you want to translate a writer who is not perceived as critically acclaimed, and the stories and their work are not valued at face value, but at how they have been received in the Assamese literary landscape already. I think this is something that we need to shift. I think writers who want to translate reputed or so-called reputed authors are welcome to translate. Translators who want to continue translate these so-called reputed authors should continue translating. But at the same time, I think it must be parallelly sort of accompanied by writers who are young, writers who are new, or writers who just wrote one novel and sort of left the scene. You know, there should be space for all kinds of writers at all stages of their careers for translating that. So that is why I thought I would talk about what needs to change. And now I'm going to talk about why this needs to change, actually. This is because, actually, if you wait for something for very basic reason, apart from what I said already, this is because if you wait for someone to gain a reputation and awards and think that this person is eligible to translate, we are actually associating in some ways a personality to the work of the author instead of valuing the work of the author as the work of the author. So what we miss out also is that exciting work coming out from the region. Translators need to pick texts not on the basis of the biodata of the writer, but rather on the ability of the text to generate conversations about Assam. In a later part of my paper, I want to come back and talk about why it is important to pick text that will generate conversations about Assam because of various reasons. But before that, I want to focus on two things. I think when a translator translates, a translator's politics is very important. This is in fact key, according to me. Who are they? Who will they decide to translate? Why are they choosing this translate? And what is driving this decision is something that I'm always very, very curious about. The translator's politics will also decide what the translator likes to read. Like, I like to read a certain kind of fiction because I'm constantly worried about human rights, equality, progressive ideas, and the society, gender, sexuality. And is the translator reading just a handful of journals? This is also something that is important. Is the translator reading on the basis of recommendations? How tuned the translator is with the new writing coming out of the state? And I feel that I'm very privileged, and I feel that I'm very lucky that I am a practicing Assamese writer. My first novel came out, I mean, people know me as an English writer, but actually in all reality and practice, I'm an Assamese writer. My first novel came out in 2013, but it was, I was publishing in Assamese from 21, I think 2001 or so, and more actively from 2004 when I moved to Delhi. I actually started writing a column for Amarahom. I wrote it for an entire year. I wrote a lot of short stories during that part. I wrote essays, critical essays in Assamese about literature and so on. So I think the translator must be an active reader of Assamese literature or any literary sphere that they are actually translating. Well, I live abroad now, so it is hard for me to keep a track of what is being translated and what is being published in Assam. But my wonderful editors who I used to write for, they continue to send me a lot of PDFs and a lot of on email. Whenever there's a new issue comes out of a magazine, I usually get a PDF. So I have everything up to date, mostly till November 2020. So I read those magazines and I figure out who is writing, which new writers are debuting in an issue and so on. I try my best to keep a track of. And I think this is something that most translators who are interested in translating work, especially from such a vitiated region, such an underrepresented, misunderstood region, must actually keep that in mind. But also, I'm able to do that because I'm an Assamese writer, and I know these editors because I worked closely with them. They edited me when I was writing in Assamese, when I still write in Assamese. And as I said, long before I wrote my first novel in Assamese English, I wrote predominantly and primarily in Assamese. That I continue to do, but I'm writing sort of more in English and less in Assamese right now. Also, one of the most important things about is being an insider of a literary culture is that being an Assamese writer, I have been able to read many of the fictional works long before their publication. For example, if somebody is planning to write a short story, and I generally, when we talk to them, they talk about, oh, Aruni, I'm planning to write this novel about it. Do you have any material? Can you help me? Or I ask them for help. So because writer colleagues discuss and show each other early drafts, seeking feedback. So this has really worked well for me. And when I want to translate, I already know like that there's a very exciting book coming out. And usually when the books, they don't disappoint, and I decide or sort of try to support the book. So my relationship with the language and literary culture is ongoing, dynamic, and very personal. This is part of my politics too, and it reflects in the choices I make as a translator. So before I talk more vaguely, and so far I've been talking very vaguely, I want to give some specific examples. I have translated many stories. I've translated one novel from Assamese, Thankrakri Tahsildar Tamo Torwal by Nida Goswami, which is the last novel by Bhamani Roy Goswami. But I want to talk about what I'm trying to say with three different stories that I translated as an example. And just a while ago, I mentioned that translators must pick a text on the basis of the text's ability to generate conversations about Assam. I want to return to this point and discuss this in the context by referring to three stories that I have translated. One of the stories I translated very long time ago, as I said, was Onurata Khorma Pujari. So I'm not going to talk about that, but I want to talk about a different story by Onurata Khorma Pujari called Surrender. I do not remember the exact citation, so please forgive me for that. This story was published in a New York-based magazine called Warscapes, and it is a story about a surrendered militant. And we know that the presence of surrendered militants who used to be on the ground and who were part of insurgency movements, were part of militia. They tried to overthrow the Indian government and sort of and were part of underground insurgency movements this is a very common figure in Assam, the surrendered militant. These people were persuaded to leave their arms by the government in the 90s, and they came back to the mainstream society and started their lives. A lot of them got married, started families, or a lot of them started businesses, and took part in different ways in the state. And some of those ways were not very nice as well. But a lot of them genuinely wanted to sort of leave violence and come back and become regular, everyday, boring, quotidian in lives, and human beings. So Surrender is the story of this insurgent who is unable to fit into the society because of his past. And he suffers from what I feel is post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't think that is something theoretically explored in the story, and the story doesn't need to do that. But Anuradha Sharma Pujari brilliantly sort of shows us the psyche of and the imbalance that this writer goes through. And as a result, he becomes a domestic abuser, and he commits domestic violence. He beats up his wife. And what really happens after that, the terrible consequences, is something that the story focuses on. Curiously, I was in conversation with the editor of War Skis magazine, and we decided that, Indian writing in English and Indian literature in translation was not able to focus the conflict zones, so-called conflict zones in India. For example, the Maoist zones in central India, Kashmir, Northeast, where conflict has sort of encouraged and pushed and created a certain kind of literature that more people should read about. And a lot of these work also have been sort of consciously discouraged from being translated or being circulated because it benefits the government. So we decided to edit a special issue together called Wounded States, India Wounded States. And I published, I translated and published Surrender, as a part of this, is ventures. The second story that I translated was much later, when I was working in India as an assistant professor of English and creative writing. And I translated the story, Yese Dorje Thongsi's Bah Phulor Gundha. It was published in a magazine in Bombay called the Indian Quarterly. And one of the reasons I wanted to translate this story, when the editor said, we want a short story from Assam to translate, was because I was also wary of seeing names with last names that signified privileged, or writers who I knew came from immense privilege, and most Assamese literature and translation actually they don't honor the really wonderful tribal tradition, that what we call Janajatiya or Khomia Lekhak, Janajatiya Lekhak, or Janajatiya tradition in Assam. We have, I think my earlier presenter, Professor Judy Datta, she talked about Yese Dorje Thongsi, Lumer Dai, but we have Kensam Kenglam, and we have Rongbong Terang, and many, many more writers who are wonderful and who actually depict who not only tell engaging stories, but are also talking about some really underwritten, underrepresented aspect of Northeast or Assamese society, Assam society. So I wanted to translate Yese Dorje Thongsi. He's a major writer in Assam. He's so widely loved. Everybody knows his work, but I think that more nationally he needs to be known. Despite his work being translated, despite his work is awarded, Sahitya Akademi Award and many, many more prizes, he's not known nationally. So I really felt strongly, and I thought Bah Phulor Gundha is a really wonderful story that could compete with any magic realist story written by Marquez or any of the Latin American boom writers. So I wanted to sort of flaunt this and be proud about this. The third story I want to talk about was published in actually 2020, is by Abdus Samad. It's called Home Without an Address. The original story was published in a collection called Hey Sokujur, and it was originally called Tikona Bihin Tikona. Strangely, I committed to translating Mr. Samad's stories because of personal reasons, and none of these. The earlier two stories came from strictly intellectual reasons. I wanted to sort of change the way Assamese literature is perceived. I wanted to divert the conversation towards tribal writers. I wanted to talk about the widespread human rights violations and the consequences of violence in Assam. I wanted to focus a story that discuss post-traumatic stress disorder. This is something that I think Assamese writing explores, but critically has not been explored in the critical writing about violence, about Assamese literature, fiction, and novels that write violence. And post-traumatic stress disorder is a very, very common disorder that people who face violence actually suffer from. But Home Without an Address was strictly for personal reasons. Almost 10, 11 years ago, I read the first novel of Mr. Samad, and I contacted him to convey that I loved his work. He asked me to translate if possible. I was at an unstable place in my life at that point, in the sense that I was leaving India and I was starting grad school in the United States, and I wasn't able to commit translating it. But when I eventually came to translate it, publish it, Assam was already in the news debating a completely new genre of poetry called Mia poetry, and there was renewed interest in the work coming out from this region. I realized that Mr. Samad's work that is widely read in Assam, that critiques many of the vagaries and idiosyncrasies of the societies in Assam, challenges the narrow idea of who is an Assamese or who belongs to Assam, was unintentionally going to be extremely relevant, extremely important. And I'm very proud of that. So I think that I'm not trying to say that my three stories sort of change the way as people talked about Assam in the global sphere. What I'm trying to say is that these are three different drops in an ocean, but I think it'll add a new color to that ocean. And I think as a translator, as an editor, we must try to do that. Coming back to the main point, why translators must pick a text on the basis of the text's ability to generate conversations about Assam. This is something that I want to come back to again. I've given the examples and I've provided the different contexts within which these stories were translated. But I think there is something that we can't also ignore in 2020, this aspect. Just as it is the duty of every Assamese editor and Assamese writer to highlight the multi-ethnic, multilingual aspect of the state, we must not forget that English traditionally has been the language of a few upper caste, upper class, heterosexual men, people in India, perhaps in broader South Asia. What these people read and decide to translate dominated much of what people thought about Assam. This problem of inadequate representation of the voices of Assam, by extension even sometimes Northeast India and the literary cultures from Northeast India, is seen also in how knowledge is created about this very contested region. This is something that you will see also in academic discourse written. You will see that there is not just an imbalance in language, but also within the English language. By imbalance in language, I mean that more and more writers who write predominantly in English and who are translated by a privileged select few, they are the writers who get discussed in the academic circles and their work is seen as valuable. But even in the English discourse, you will see that more and more you will see that, especially from a place like Assam, a certain privileged section, their work and their fiction, their poetry is repeatedly reviewed, repeatedly sort of discussed in academic circles and seen as more valuable. But the lower caste writer, the queer writer, they are not seen as equally valuable, for example. So just to sort of give you a broad example. Secondly, for a region that is highly racialized, highly militarized, where conflict has dominated most of the time in the last 3 decades, which stories will go out? Which stories will go out and which stories will be available in a language with more power, which is English, has immense significance. Many students from Assam often complain to me that people only know about violence in Assam or about ethnic strife. It is true that violence and conflict have shaped our lives. It is of all of us who were born in the 80s. It is also true that ethnic strife has been a part of our life. we have grown up reading many tragic stories about this, but we also know that this is not the only story of Assam. And how do we change it? By telling more and more diverse stories from Assam. I want to make two final points before I leave. One is that, and most importantly, we must remember that our stories are not only told and owned by people who are privileged in Assam, but also by people who are not from Assam, who doesn't have the adequate knowledge to write about Assam. And by extension, this also applies to many places in Northeast. Read any coverage about Assam, you will see racism, sweeping generalizations that create an extremely biased, racist discourse about Assam. As a person who engages with narratives, I don't think there is any other way but to pick up the best and the most provocative stories from Assam and translate it and discuss and represent, show and represent the very sort of intersectional existence that we live, across many different identities, and how identity and identity is very intersectional, and identity is very messy. The lived experience of Assam is always challenging what is being written about Assam by others, what is being written about Assam by even as insiders in Assam in academic discourses. So I think literature from the usually marginalized sections of Assam can really change that, and I think we must remember that. And I want to sort of bring attention finally before I leave to the collection of stories that I edited and published with HarperCollins Publishers. It's called How to Tell the Story of an Insurgency. How to Tell the Story of an Insurgency is a collection of stories that I put together in order to sort of show the rich work that has been produced produced as a response to the long drawn conflict in Assam of different kinds. Some of the stories are in Boros, some of the stories are in Assamese, while others are in English. I think there are 3 English stories, if I'm not wrong. The main reason I wanted to put together this collection of stories is because I felt that there is when I started the project in 2012, I felt that there are no stories about Assam available, and it is because of the absence of stories, people were misunderstanding Assam, misrepresenting Assam, and that was leading to more and more racial representations of Assam. So I think that stories go a long way in eradicating these depictions, in healing relationships. And I think that one of the ways we can do that is by translating. So that's why I come back to the original reworked, tweaked title of my paper, Contemporary Assamese Literature, What Needs to Change. I think these are the things that need to change. And I'm happy to elaborate on most of the points. I'm speaking primarily from memory. It's early morning. I just had half a cup of tea. But I'm happy to elaborate on any of the points if you have further questions. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk.
Thank you so much, sir. It was lovely to hear you. Although it was just from memory you were speaking, but it was a very great introduction that you gave. Also directed our attention to the issues of change and shift that we need to kind of address when we talk about larger debates within translation. Also very important issue that you raised about the politics of identity that should be the focus when we talk about the location of the translator per se. I think it's time that we take a few questions, if you can answer them. The first question is by Ratnotma Das ma'am. She asks, what do you enjoy the most, writing, translating, or teaching creative writing?
Oh, I love writing more, of course. 5 a.m. is the time I wake up and write. And most of the time I write without thinking about publication. I have a lot of writing that is unpublished, and I don't care because I really like writing. I have many stories that are unpublished, and I don't want to ever go back to it. But I had fun writing them. I do translation as a sense of duty. I think that this is my way of giving back to the language that I derive so much nourishment from. And that's but it is more of a sense of duty. Translation for me is an intellectual exercise. It's more out of guilt, more out of duty. But writing is like humming a song. You know, you're walking in the road and you just hum a song. It is not coming out of any obligation. It is coming out because your body wants to release a song.
Right. Thank you for your answer. We'll move on to our next question. It's by Shankar Padmanabhan. His question is, what would you say that a translator has to keep their primary focus of introducing a story or a novel which they admire or like to a larger audience, as they feel it needs to be discussed and read about more in more languages through translation?
I would say only translate work that you admire. Otherwise, it's a long investment. It's like a PhD. You know, you don't want to work on a PhD on a topic that you don't love. So otherwise, you'll have a very unhappy PhD for 2-3 years, and you'll have a very unhappy advisor. Especially in the United States, where PhDs are as long as 5 years. So work on a topic that you have chosen. Work on a topic that you love. And continue working on that. Don't work on anything that one thinks is strategic. If you love the work, but we also must remember that we also usually love a certain work because also maybe we're not exposed to many other brilliant works. So a translator must be a very well-read person in a language and contemporary writing from the language from that language, contemporary and classic writing from the language. So you must translate what you admire, but it is not an excuse to not read in that language.
Yes, and I think we have comments for your presentation, for your lovely presentation. So, and also one question by Janabi Nath. Question is, what are the differences that you find between translating poetry and translating novels?
I actually don't translate poetry at all. I refuse to translate poetry. I did translate poetry once, and that was by Lutfa Hanum Selima Begum, and that's because I admire her work and I love her personally. But I don't like translating poetry because I think I end up messing it up, killing it. I'm not a good translator of poetry. That's the only time I translated poetry.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. I think it's time that we...
Sorry, every time I say like I'm not going to translate.
Okay. So I think thanks a lot for giving your time. It was lovely to hear you. Thanks a lot again. It's time. I think it's time that we, the final moment of this last session. And before I hand over to Dr. Ratnotma Das ma'am, I'd really like to extend my thanks to all the listeners, especially the speakers, for enlightening us about not just Assamese literature, but different debates and concepts, ideas related to translation. My heartfelt thanks to Ratnotma Das ma'am and also HOD sir, Professor P.C. Patnaik, for giving us this wonderful learning opportunity to all of us, and also our very own Dr. Venkat sir for his constant technical support. Over to you, ma'am, for the closing note. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you very much. I'll thank you formally and I thank you later again. So we have come to the concluding session, the last part of the webinar, and you can imagine how happy and relieved I am. I consider it as a very successful webinar and I'm very happy. So I would like to start my remarks. I'd like to be very brief and sort of informal. I hope that's okay with you. Okay, to start with, initially, I must convey my gratitude to Professor Patnaik, who came with the wonderful idea of series of webinars, and in a different way. Otherwise, all of us know that this is the time during the COVID that this is like a webinar mela, that reign of webinars. Then what is the difference? Something different, something intellectual, something in true sense enriching. So everything started with Dr. Venkat's webinar in the department in the month of October. After that, Professor Patnaik's 3-part webinar on folk life, which ended this month only. And then this third one is mine. I'm using the word mine, but it is actually ours, it is yours. This webinar, I came with the proposal that Assamese literature in translation, and Professor Patnaik agreed, encouraged, and he was very happy that his disciple, his student is following his footsteps, following his idea. So this is how it started. Frankly speaking, initially I thought, yeah, it will be easy. It will be at least easier than organizing one seminar, one physical seminar, because I have the experience of organizing seminars in the Department of MIL and LS. Well, I thought, but the truth was something else. The reality was something else. It was not that easy. It would not have been possible without all of your support. So now this is my job to thank you formally. And I apologize if somebody's name is left by mistake, and mistake is to everybody. To err is human, and I'm also not an exception. Okay. Again, let me tell you one point. It is my personally, I think, but I thought a lot, I read a lot, and after thinking so again and again, I came to the conclusion that translation and poetry, these two are the most difficult genre of literature. Just now, Aruni Kashyap rightly said that he doesn't dare to translate poetry because he doesn't want to kill it. That's true. He is being very honest. I personally think poetry and translation both are very difficult. One has to be very, very careful while creating a piece of poetry, while recreating an original literature bit or translate it. But fortunately, and at the same time, unfortunately, most of the Indian languages, and I can say in Assamese, these two are most. Translations and poems are available like anything, but one has to be very careful. Honesty is very much needed, as Zuri ma'am said. Well, with this type of concepts and some thoughts in my mind, I dared to proceed and convene this international webinar. My intention was to let you know about Assamese literature. You means, I mean all of you. Because in Assam, already many things have been already discussed. What is new? But if it is in English, if it reaches a larger audience, my intention will be fulfilled. And I hope at least a little bit is fulfilled. At least a part of my dream is fulfilled. That Assamese literature in translation has been discussed in 16 total papers in two days, yesterday and today. Interestingly, out of these 16 papers, 3 papers were on and about Indira Goswami and her works. Why? Why particularly Indira Goswami? Of course, she is great. Of course, she is popular. Of course, without any doubt, she is my personal favorite also. But why 3 papers out of 6? The answer is very simple. Because translations are available. That means translation is so much important to reach the reader. Because Indira Goswami's translations are available and it's more than other writers of Assam, that's why more papers are coming, and the papers are from non-Assamese paper presenters. One is Telugu, one is from Andhra Pradesh, one is from Rajasthan, and another one is from Canada. And another one is from Sri Lanka. So all these 3 papers. So this is one example only that translation is needed to reach larger audience. So this type of webinar, I hope, will help to introduce our literature, my Assamese literature, our Assamese literature to the outside world. So this is how everything started. We got 16 papers. I have thanked Professor Patnaik, and thank you is not enough. The word thank you is not enough to thank Patnaik, sir. I don't know even how to thank him. And then I would love to thank all the colleagues, students of MIL and LS department, or I can say that MIL and LS family, our department family, Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, because you have supported me like anything. The cooperation was overwhelming. And yeah, we have departmental meetings in between. Everybody started to support the webinar. It was rescheduled. Everybody stopped their classes, everything. And everybody all were present in the webinar. So I thank you all. I thank you from the core of my heart and my dear students. And I'm really very sorry. I'm mentioning my students first and the other students from Assam and other places. I thank you all too. Don't think that I am biased towards my students, because only because I know them personally. I can recognize their faces in the small boxes. But anyway, thank you, the other students also, because you are our asset and you are the future. And this is especially for you, this webinar. So all the students. Well, Professor Pradeep Acharya, it was really wonderful to have Acharya sir among us who delivered the keynote address. I already mentioned that I do not know him that much personally, though his name is so much known in Assam. He's such a stalwart. He's such an authority in the field of translation. So I was a little bit surprised when sir agreed immediately to deliver the keynote address. I met him only once in Sahitya Academy. Anyway, thank you, sir. Even if you are not present, I extend my heartfelt thank you. All the paper presenters, all 16 paper presenters, well, 15, excluding me, excluding myself. I thank you all. Without your papers, this webinar would not have been possible. And I thank you particularly the outside participants. They had to compromise a lot. For example, Aruni Kashyap, he is with his half cup of tea and his sleepy eyes. It's early morning there. So thank you, the participants. And today's first paper, the presenter was from Oklahoma, and he was feeling sleepy because it was late in night. So I didn't realize when I started organizing this thing, when I started thinking of the concept, I didn't realize that it would be a problem like anything to manage the time zones. That's this in Indian Standard Time and the other time zone. But thankfully, everybody cooperated and it was possible. And participants from Assam and other parts of India, they really understood my problem, that this slot is booked because the participant from another time zone. So please give me a time slot. So everybody understood, and it was possible within just 2 days. 2 days of time, yesterday and today. So I'd like to name especially few participants. I don't know them personally, but I have seen these names. They were very active throughout the seminar. Basudev Das, of course, I know him. I know his name. I know his work. He's very much present almost all the papers. He has taken active participation, asked questions, observations. Lakshajit, Jahnabinath, Sampak Kumar Sharma, Papori Sanapati, Deepak Kumar Borpakakoti, Vishwajit Mohanta, and many other. I do not know them personally, but they are very much there. Thank you so much, all of you. Particularly, I have named only few because I'm seeing you all the time being present with us. Thank you so much. And well, I'm sorry if name is left. If somebody's name is left, I'm sorry, but believe that I'm really thankful. And well, our assets, Preeti Kalra and Ruchi Rana. Preeti made all the invitation covers and the posters. She did very nicely. Ruchi is always there when Dr. Venkatramaya was absent for a little brief time, for a short span of time. Ruchi handled it very well, the technical side. Our moderators, again, I'm so proud of you. I always feel that I take you for granted and take it as a compliment. I have so much faith on you. Actually, really, I could not have done such a good job if it was given to me. I will name Preeti Kalra, Raina Bawal, and Tejaswini, Mandvi Chaudhary, Ruchi Rana. And these are only 5 of our wonderful moderators. So thank you very much. You did really, really well. And you are really our asset. And there are actually many more. I could not accommodate because my webinar is only 2 days. That 9-day webinar, all of them performed very well. And sometimes I learn from you, really. And Dr. Venkat sir is there or not, without your technical support. He is the technical head, and I'm really thankful, Venkat sir. And you were very, very supportive from the very beginning. Dr. Homen, Amitabh, everybody was so supportive. Thank you, Venkat sir, especially. And anybody left, I'm really worried, but I must thank this COVID situation also. It may sound funny, but I'm really thankful to this COVID situation. This COVID has already taught us many things. It taught us to be tech savvy also. It taught us that we can be united even if we are staying at home. So because of COVID situation only, it's possible for organizing this webinar. So this sounds funny, but I'm really thankful. And with these words, I would like to conclude my concluding remark, and I will hand over it to Ruchi again, and I will ask our wonderful moderator to announce the seminar is closed. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the listeners, speakers, and Ratnotma ma'am for your closing note. Ma'am, shall we close now?
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Venkat sir, please.